A short trail today. First of all, up to the old quarry. I've never been here before, so I don't actually know the site. And then along St George's here, this trail. So I'm only going to do a short part of it and then head north up to East Cowes from Arreton here. I'm not sure which routes to take initially, at least heading north up towards East Cowes, but I'm going to end up at the same place as I did the other day, and then take the ferry, or the floating bridge as it's called here on the island, across down to Cowes, West Cowes, and then head south down the Route 23 back home. Now, I may have mentioned before, but I actually subscribe to the OS maps. That's the old Ordnance Survey maps. And the reason being online is that first of all, whilst it's about, I think it's about £23 for the year, but it means anywhere in the UK, and also it means it can zoom into 25,000 as well as 50,000 or 250,000. So I don't need different maps that I carry in my bag all the time, which I used to when I used to go hiking in the Lake District in Scotland. I'll give you some helpful hints though if you have an e-bike, because it does matter. And unfortunately on the OS maps it doesn't actually show where there are any styles, and why that matters is that my bike now is just too heavy. I can't lift it. If I have to, sometimes I've taken off the panniers, I've taken off the battery, but it's still bad for your back. It's not a good idea when you've got to climb over something for it. So just let you know is that where you see these diagonal diamond shaped ones, then that's good. You just generally no styles. It's the same where there's almost an unbroken green thread. Then again, that's a very good path, so you shouldn't need it to climb over a stile. And of course the blue and orange paths are dedicated cycle tracks. Excellent stuff. I've put here a list of all electric bike charging points on the island. See, these are the official places that you can use pretty much for free, although I generally buy a cup of coffee whilst I'm just waiting for an extra bit of charge. Sometimes it's just an extra bit, just as an insurance to make sure I get home. I've stopped asking in other places because I've been declined now, and I've just found it rather irritating when I'm there to buy something. My trusty steed with a new seat cover now. Cycling through Old Chorlton Village, St John the Baptist, and now we're going to be heading west up to the main road. Initially down Route 23. I know I've filmed this before past the Bargeman's Rest, but it's just different sets of tide, just gives an indication of how high the water comes up here. I think I've mentioned it before, but this is a shared space, so this is a footpath and a cycle path, hence why you'll see pedestrians about me as well. Again, I'm only going to do a little bit of Route 23. This is just to get to the main road rather, before I'm going to head off up to the St George's Trail. This footage doesn't actually give an accurate kind of description of just how steep this road really is. I say it's a road, it's very, very quiet road, but it is part of the cycle track. It is very, very steep. If you look at the contours, the 5 metre contours on the OS map, you'll realise just how steep it is. This is one of the many towers from the Second World War. This overlooks quite a high terrain here. In fact, we're at the top of the quarry, so you'll be able to see shortly just the view that you have across all the way to Hampshire and across the Isle of Wight. There are many watchtowers all the way around the Isle of Wight that date back, some of them date back 500 years, back to Henry VIII's time and Elizabeth I's time. These are actually just from the Second World War. This is heading, or facing north rather. There are plenty on the south as well. Presumably that was where the invasion was going to be for invading Britain during the Second World War. Now we join the trail proper. This is St George's Trail. We're at the top of the ridge now, so we're looking down. From here we're looking down north towards Hampshire. I've mentioned before that there are so many trails in the Isle of Wight for cycling as well as walking, hiking, that it's just taken me years and years just to explore parts of it. I'm nowhere near the end. This is actually not one of the official cycle tracks, the national cycle track routes. The best ones are obviously down towards in the valleys, so they're the old railway lines. This is actually up obviously in the downs. I'm not sure if this is typical for this track, but I never met anybody, not a cyclist, not a dog walker, not a hiker, all this morning that I cycled along here. I had new tyres put on because it's done now 1,000 miles in the last year, so it was wearing a bit thin. So I got new tyres on this, but the pressure was too high. I actually had to let about 20 psi out of the tyres to get through this gravel. When I first came to the Isle of Wight many years ago, I actually thought it was quite small. But when you actually get out of a car and get on a bike or go walking, you realise just how big it is. And before anybody comments, no, I am not an MTB technical expert type person. I think that's pretty evident from this. It's like steep going downhill now towards Arrington. I found it a little bit intimidating, especially when I started to lose traction on the front, even though I've got 2 disc brakes, back and front. Perhaps I had too much, I still had too much pressure in the tyres, but it didn't feel too easy to control. I wish I'd discovered this place last year because I relawned my lawn and I used seed, but there's a lot of weeds in it, whereas I didn't like the B&Q turf. But this is beautiful turf here, I should have got this. I really try to avoid roads when I'm out cycling, simply because I don't like them anyway. I just don't like being on roads, even in a car really these days. I prefer to be on an e-bike. However, it's unavoidable to get to Wootton from here. Now I'm going to take the old coastal road. It's called the Coastal Path, I think, or Coastal Road, and it's all the way from this part of from Wootton all the way up to East Cowes. It's going to be my route to the ferry. Thankfully, though, the road is really quiet because the main road, which runs parallel to this, carries most of the traffic. So I didn't come across many cars at all getting towards East Cowes. Now we're getting towards Osborne House, and I think that's why these ornate, well, the villages seem more ornate anyway and more manicured, probably because of the royal connection, because a lot of people used to live around here who were connected to the royal family. Now we're just coming down to St Mildred's Church. This is it was popularised by Queen Victoria. It's very close to the Medina estuary. You can just see down here now. You can see the distance there from the church itself to the estuary. We're still part of the main cycle route as well through Whippingham up towards East Cowes, which we're going to head to shortly. But I just thought I'd have another quick look inside the church as well. But first, have a quick look across the estuary. Now we're exactly at this latitude of where we live in our little village, just across the river there. But obviously I've got to get round to get over to it. I noticed this inscription here from Queen Victoria, but I don't know what this is. This looks like it predates the church, and they'd put there whilst the church was being built from a previous building. I had a quick look inside the church, but I didn't want to disturb anybody because I could hear somebody down at the front here, and I think he was lighting candles, so I didn't want to disturb him. But I just thought I'd take a quick bit of footage there. Now through Cowes Estate, through East Cowes to get back to the ferry. Now East and West Cowes, or just Cowes, are a very different kind of character. Each person's got their own preference. I'm not particularly snobby about it. They're both really cool places, but they do have quite different character. I think because Cowes, i.e. West Cowes, is so old, that dates back, well, pretty much several thousand years, the houses are really old, much older, and there's very little room to actually grow for the town itself to grow, whereas here there's a lot of new builds that keeps encroaching further and further south towards Whippingham. Now we're just heading towards the chain ferry, or floating bridge. I don't know why locally it's called the floating bridge, but it is the chain ferry. It's quite controversial on the island because it keeps breaking down for reasons that seems really obvious, i.e. that it's a tidal estuary and so it puts pressure on the chains and that you can't manoeuvre. This is the car park for the Red Funnel ferry over to Southampton. It takes about an hour to get there by the car ferry. A lot of this is knocked down. Just a year or two before, this was all a big factory, so there's a lot more space, it's a lot more open. It's actually quite pretty as well. They've really beautified it better than it did look before. As a cyclist, it's the same price as a passenger, which is about £1.50. It is £1.50 each way. Now, if it's not in service, there is a quick boat that goes across that you can take bicycles on anyway, but you can't take cars, obviously. Now that's when I feel anxious, because I'm thinking, when should I tack? Will I be able to pass behind the stern? So you don't want to hit the chains. I always hate sailing through here when I know the chain ferry's working, simply because you don't know when it's just going to start moving, and it'll just move. It doesn't make a sound, whereas the ferries do. The Red Jet ferry, the Red Funnel ferry, does make a sound before it leaves port, whereas the chain ferry doesn't. And you've got to time it so well. And the other thing as well is that when there are queues, when it's really busy, there's so many boats waiting to pass that you're in a queue. You're committed when you're committed, and so you sometimes I lose my bottle and I end up doing a full U-turn, going back and then rejoining the next queue, waiting to get it. I'd sooner play safe than sorry when it comes to the chain ferry. Home stretch. Now I'm going to rejoin the Route 23, which is the old railway, heading south, back to our little village. Thank you. At this point, I'm actually thinking of going further on to, say, Gurnard and maybe even Thorness, simply because I've got so much juice still left in the battery. I wanted to use it, and it was a beautiful bank holiday day. It was a really sunny day, and I knew that there was rain coming. Now we're on the west side of the estuary. Again, just heading down the Route 23. Now my boat is just a little bit further south down here on one of the jetties, which is part of Cowes Harbour Commission. Not cheap jetties at all. In fact, I'm going to take it back up to the local authority one down at the Folly, simply because I don't get as much use out of it for the cost I'm paying. Homeward bound, my last little path to get back to our tiny little village, and I can just about see the boats down in the estuary. Another beautiful May bank holiday.